The origins of the United Latin America. It is a concept that has been around for a very long time, of the idea that Latin America, mainly speaking Spanish speaking Latin American country, should be united as a single entity. And it is a concept that still goes to this day, the more popular for La Patria Grande or La Gran Patria. And now it's Sur economy system with Venezuela and Brazil, this is the closest we gotta get. But where did this idea originally come from? And is it even possible to unite Latin America? Short answer, yes, and it's almost been tried successfully on different occasions. For example, the Gran Colombia in South America. Then you have the Central American the Republic that lasted for a decade. Then you have the Confederacy of the Lesser Antilles that has also lasted a decade, and the idea of the Confederacy of the Antilles of the Puerto Rico, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Jamaica, and the Haiti, and the Bahamas was almost happened. The only thing was missing Puerto Rico achieved its independence, but sadly didn't succeed. Its revolution, Lares, etc. But people have an often common misconception that the origins of a concept of a united Latin America comes from Simon Bolivar, especially when he saw concept of Gran Colombia and trying to unite not only South America but the whole Latin America. But in fact, the concept goes back even further. It is actually unknown when the idea first come up with, but it is possible that as early as the 70s, 80s or 70s, 90s, the idea goes. It's been developed over time. The problem was these early proponents of the United Latin America, unlike the Simon Bolivar and people after him, were loyalists and monarchists, people who still support monarchy and the Spanish, British, and French empires, who wanted to create their own empire and make allies with the British, Spaniard, and French empires. The earliest known figure who supported this was Francisco Miranda, who started the first ever revolution for independence in Latin America in 1806 in Venezuela. In fact, the word Colombia, which has the earliest reference, goes to him, to Francisco Miranda. By 1797, when he became disillusioned by the French Revolution, he was more of a liberal Republican, later turned loyalist and monarchist. We yet met another group occur in 1797 when he found himself a group of like-minded individuals in French Guiana. Este political constitution for with Prime Minister Pitt the second time. Accordingly, Miranda with a small group like in Spanish Americans met in Paris in 1797. They declared themselves representative of the various regions and signed an official petition to present to Pitt as proof of Spanish American desire for self-determination. The signature represent only themselves in this so-called Paris Convention. You have met Venezuela Miranda, Peruvian Jose Godoy del Pozo y Sucre, Chilean Manuel Jose de Salsa, signed the treaty with the French federal traveler Louis de Port witnessed the act of secrecy. Others in Miranda experienced Paris Circle, including Peruvian Pablo de Olvaride, in Cuba Pedro Jose Carlos, and Venezuela Francisco Isnadi and Ignacio Bejarano, may have contributed to the scheme but did not sign the final document. The Act of Paris contains several specific instructions, all debated and unanimously sanctioned by the Americans' free self-appointed representatives include 1. Full independence to be secured by a treaty of friendship and alliance with Great Britain. 2. A guarantee of maritime protection and military assistance to the rapid with £30 million sterling immediately after independence, and the rest with precious metal over a agreed span. 3. Ideological alliance between the United States, Great Britain, and Spanish America against the detestable maxim professed by the French Republic. By the way, they were super racist who believe only white people should be in charge. There's that. A commercial treaty of term most favorable to the British nation, including exclusive right to the canal route through Central America from a Pacific period. And 5. Request that Miranda had any military forces based in America by virtue of his extensive experience and patriotism. The Act of Paris was a stunning document, not only because of its obvious professionalism at its very early day, but because its clear goal is informal assessment of European power relations and an intended British audience. 15 years later, when the legitimate appointed Spanish American convoys came to London to petition the British government for the same sort of thing, they did so using strictly similar languages. Pitt already felt threatened by French expansionism, and so the signatures ordered Miranda and Olavet and delegate a junta of deputies at the People province of America Meridional. They proceed to London first, but if no positive reception was found to be there, no proceed immediately to Philadelphia to shop their plans around there. In this way, they play upon Pitt's impression on the North American design as well. The balance of power has shifted, and after years of experience in the thicket of Parisian politics, Miranda had learned how to exploit it to his advantage. Francisco Miranda had already hoped that he could interest the British in his schemes. Several of his friends recalled his partiality to the country, his culture, his governmental forms. His French cellmate, Luantoni Champagneus, was a little hurt to find Miranda's always seemed to me to esteem us little, and that he preferred the English. He also spoke with admiration for the hero who had fought for liberty in North America. In general, I observed that Miranda had a predilection for just and virtuous men. The Paris document quickly circulated among the whole way of powerful the Atlantic world. President John Adams of the United States received a copy in August 25, 1798, and bundle of letters from Timothy Pickering, his Secretary of State. Miranda and Caro sent similar package to Alexander Hamilton and General Henry Knox. With some overestimate, Miranda told Hamilton that he would wait impatiently for a reply because this is the greatest and most glorious project that has ever been presented to the world. Miranda clearly linked this matter of great importance for the future of my fatherland and very interesting as well for the prosperity of your own. The Paris Convention of 1797 was important because it revealed two key things about Miranda's evolving American identity. First, he realized that an American constitution was an essential prerequisite for action in modern politics, made to placate Pitt at the point, but also govern successfully in long term. Second, while in Europe, Miranda began to work with other South Americans from across the continent, thereby broadening both his movement and his perception of the challenges that faced them all. In Paris, he met many like-minded Spanish Americans, including the Colombian Antonio Nariño and Pedro Fermín de Vargas, each of whom had been declared person non grata by the audience of New Granada for their sedition activities. Nariño had translated and printed the French Declaration of Rights and Man in 1794, and Republic conspired with his friend Vargas to overthrow the colonial government. Vargas had abandoned his position as corregidor of Zipaquira, ransacked the region's treasury, and fled South America with his mistress, Barbara Forero. Like Miranda before him, Nariño had approached William Pitt with a request for financial and military support for Spanish American emancipation, but met with little success. When the Spanish authorities had interrogated Nariño about the goings-on in London, he preferred to make only vague statements and ever once mentioned Miranda's name. Only the two clearly had known each other and worked together in Europe. So with the signing of the with the Act of Paris, the Spanish-American emancipation movement began a new, more collaborative and mature phase. Spanish America fulfilled the heresy met with the European capital and began to formulate plans for their collective futures. Their early romantic years, conspiring with the shadow of the French Revolution, set the tone for the next decade of the Spanish American strive for independence. The Spanish Convention had been signed, their mission was defined, all that remained was to build support to put the plan into motion. The Spanish ambassador in Paris warned his agent to be on the lookout for Caro, who was wearing a black wig immediately perfectly for the hair of black people, who was dark in his face and skin the same color with the substance so effective that neither sweat nor water can remove it. Blackface. Dressed in his absurd manner, Caro managed to slip out of Europe, headed for the Caribbean to form rebellion. Miranda returned to England, posing as a merchant, complete with wig and green spectacle, and using a duck-colored passport that identified as an American Count Miranda. The first thing Miranda did upon arriving at Dover on January 12, 1798, was to write to his very dear friend John Turnbull, recounting his narrow escape from the claws of the Directory, and expressed desire to know all that he had passed in England during his long absence. Miranda attempted to remind Pitt of his agreement with at Hollywood all these many years ago, namely to support Spanish America in case of a war with Spain. In 1790, Miranda had been single voice, albeit charismatic and persistent one, pursuing British political figures in a halfway driving room power to support the expedition to South America. They were interested but not fully convinced. Miranda projected a return to England in 1798, however, met with a very different political climate, and he had gotten better at the game. He had become Francisco de Miranda, principal agent of Spanish American colonies, with the other accreditation and instructions signed by American representatives to let him legitimacy. Never mind that this agent was self-appointed in the proclamation self-serving. Miranda had to wrap himself in a flag of legitimacy and popularity that was something the British government finally was able to embrace. And even though he was the first to propose the idea of United Latin America, and even the first to propose independent Latin America, he wanted an empire, similar to the British Empire. Simon Bolivar was against this, and he preferred more of a constitutional republic similar to the United States. Uh, Despite being a monarchist and a loyalist, he had friends from all political sides, from loyalists, monarchists, Republicans, liberals, conservatives, and even anarchists. Este, that he was a truly international civilian who believed Episcopalianism and internationalism. In fact, he even got support by the Peruvian Jesuit Juan Pablo Viscardo y Guzman, who wrote the first document that made the case for the independence of Spanish America, called La Cartas a los españoles americanos, or Upper Letter to the American Spaniards. Historians have called this document Spanish American Acts of Independence, and it has been compared to Thomas Jefferson's writing of British America. From its opening line, Viscardo letter reveals our affinity with intellectual trends current throughout the Atlantic world, and emphasizes sober reflection and scientific observation as a proper basis for action, the people's right to choose their own government, and the necessity for that government to respond to the people's desire. Also presents some merging modern concept of nationalism, the idea that one intrinsically belongs to the land of one's birth. The Carta first set out historical case for Spanish America independence by examining the three centuries cause and effects in our history. Viscardo revealed a truth so plain that one might abbreviate into these four words: ingratitude, injustice, slavery, and desolation. He built the historical case for independence on the precedents, logic, natural rights and origins, and the conqueror's accomplishments. Throughout his extended argument, Viscardo stressed that his separate national identity has always opposed American and Spanish interests. For Viscardo, de facto independence has existed in America since the 16th century. American conquerors and settlers had earned independence throughout their brave action and by their permanent residence on the New World. In his view, nothing more than a simple affection tradition still held Americans to the Spanish crown, a lamentable sentimentality that had caused Americans to ignore their own interests for too long, led by a blind enthusiasm that had not considered that so much earnestness for a country to which we are strangers, to which we own nothing, on which we do not depend, on whom we expend nothing, because the worst treason to that which we were born, which furnished nourishment to us and to our children. As final evidence for Spanish hypocrisy, Viscardo claimed that the Crown himself is both recognized and guaranteeing de facto American independence of its own started policies. What should Spain and her government say if we should seriously insist on the execution of this fine system, and why insult us so cruelly in speaking on union and equality? This resolution, the government of Spain has itself pointed out to us, and constantly consider you as a people distinct from European Spaniards, and this distinction imposed on you the most ignominious slavery. Let us agree on our part to be different people. Let us renounce the ridiculous idea of union and equality with our masters and tyrants. In other words, Spain has been first in transgressing all her duties towards us. She must have been the first to break the feeble bonds with will be able to attach and retain us. Americans will not hesitate to declare independence when Spain treats them as differently already. The second major section of Viscardo's Carta constructed the legal and political case for Spanish American independence. He already proved that Spain has abrogated its treaty which called Hombres and the Conquerors, thereby forfeiting its right to the New World. He then argued that the Spanish Christianization mission had long since ended, and therefore nullified the decree and no continued domination as well. Similarly, Viscardo thought the Spanish court had overstepped its traditional role and also subverted the power of the Cortes, which represent different classes of the nation, were to be depository and guardians of the rights of the people. Taking John Locke's second treaty of the government and his inspiration, Viscardo reached back to the judicial history of Aragon to find an article of the ancient constitution that decreed that if the king violated the rights and privileges of the people had a right to disown him for their sovereign and to elect another in his place, even of the pagan religion. There he found a direct progenitor of the constitutionalist argument, the Spanish American cabildos, or municipal councils, who used to assert their control when Napoleon took King Ferdinand hostage in 1808. Viscardo's historical argument went a long way toward establishing a pantheon of Spanish American heroes and anti-heroes. An essential component of modern national identity is something upon which Miranda and the next generation elaborate significant for their heroes. Viscardo invited Spanish America to constitute annals for 3 centuries. They will find the great Columbus, whom Spain had betrayed by regaining on his contracts. Other heroes include the pretty authentic Inca Garcilaso de la Vega, the young and innocent Inca Tupac Amaru, and the entire proud mestizo race, who were born in this country of Indian mothers and Spanish fathers. Equally important for the invented Spanish-American pantheon were Viscardo's anti-hero, Vicero Don Francisco de Toledo, that ferocious hypocrite who put to death the sole heir of the Empire of Peru and all the bloodsuckers employed by the government. Viscardo appealed to incipient Creole nationalism by drawing upon American shared history and identity as their common enemies. His writings and Miranda's subsequent enthusiastic distribution of his text inspired a generation. Viscardo's Carta was brilliant, well argued, and passionate case for Spanish American independence, the first of its kind. It incorporated Enlightenment political philosophy, legal precedents, and appealed to history and historical memory. Above all, it confirmed the people's right to determine their own fate. He addressed audiences as brothers and countrymen, spoke to men as an insider, used that privileged position to validate his authority. Viscardo told Americans that they had a divine mission, a brilliant future awaited them if only they had the courage to seize right where there was already. What a agreeable spectacle would be the fertile shores of American present, covering with men from all nations, changing the production of their country against ours. And many from among them, flying oppression and misery, will come to enrich us by their industry and their knowledge, and repair our exhausted population. This would America reconcile the extremities of the earth, and her inhabitation, united by a common interest, will form one great family of brothers. Strangely enough, there is no evidence that Viscardo and Miranda ever met, although both were involved in similar discussion with Pitt at the same time. Miranda did not return to London until January 11, 1798. Viscardo died in the same city, bitter, cold, and alone at the end of February. United States Ambassador Rufus King inherited Jesuit personal papers, which he subsequently loaned to Miranda. Miranda realized the significance of this catch and lost no time joining Viscardo's effort to his own. As early as July 1799, Miranda sent a copy to Carta to Pedro Jose Caro and his former Paris associate, now agent for his scheme in Trinidad, telling him to use it to rally support, especially among British merchants there. By September, he had sent Caro at least 4 other copies. On November 14, 1799, Miranda passed on the same text to Alexander Hamilton, describing as a document of great importance for the future of my country. Viscardo's open letter to Spanish America had become Miranda's mission statement. Like Viscardo, Miranda was frustrated with the non-commercial semi-support of Pitt's government that was determined to seek other channels to advance his plans. In France, Miranda used power of public opinion as part of his defense strategy. In London, he set out to launch a propaganda war to build moral case for Spanish American emancipation to put political pressures on the British government. He needed to get his message out to spread as far as possible. The most obvious way to do was to publish the inexpensive edition of the Carta. Rufus King paid the printer, and Viscardo's letter Español Americano appeared in London in 1799, bearing a false Philadelphia imprint to avoid antagonizing Pitt. By 1801, Miranda had translated the pamphlet into Spanish for distribution throughout America. He was successful. In 1804, Spanish Minister of State for Dispatch Pedro de Cervado warned his overseas colleague to intercept the dangerous threat. Despite their best intentions, handwriting copies continued to reach disaffected Creoles throughout the continent, forcing the Mexican Inquisition to prohibit the circulation once again during the aftermath of the Hidalgo revolt in 1810. After so many years of dreaming and laboring in distant isolation, Miranda desperately needed to be needed, to have the value of his work confirmed by South America. His prayers has answered in the person of a 19-year-old Bernardo Riquelme, better known as Bernardo O'Higgins, the future liberator of Chile. the illegitimate son of the Peruvian viceroy Ambrosio O'Higgins. Young Bernardo had been sent to London in 1797 to complete his education. He was enrolled in the Richmond Academy but fell in love with Charlotte Eos, the daughter of his headmaster. He was promptly transferred to Miranda School for propriety's sake. The idealistic youth was lonely and tried to persuade his guardian to let him return home. Complained that there was no other Chileans in London and that no one in the city knew anything at all about Chile. It was the crucial time in both of their lives. O'Higgins met Miranda, a seasonal soldier and veteran traveler who was 30 years his senior, looking for a disciple. Beginning in 1798, the impressionable young Chilean spent hours in Venezuela's general home, seated at his feet, observing both his training and his rhetoric. Together they pored over books on military history and tactics. In fact, legends say that Miranda himself tutored the young man in mathematics. Miranda even took O'Higgins to meet Prime Minister William Pitt. Undoubtedly having an audience with the leader of the most powerful country in the world made quite an impression on Bernardo, barely 20 years old and nursing his first broken heart around the same time. Miranda's old friend, John Turnbull, invited Miranda and O'Higgins to dinner in order to discuss potential commercial ventures between the two countries. It was the dawn of the Romantic Age. It would be more romantic than the liberation once people from tyranny and oppression. By the time he left London, O'Higgins was broadly stricken with a emacipated fever that he unwisely wrote to his father that he was going to hurry home to a fruitful career serving the fatherland or to a glorious death. His father could not have been amused. To underscore the deadly seriousness of their mission, Miranda scribbled down some private instruction to his young protege to read and then destroy during the long sea journey home. O'Higgins did not bring himself to burn the paper and kept it in the brim of his hat the years afterward. The original text of the note has survived, and choose slightly different version usually give it the title Advice from an Old South American to a Young Compatriot to leaving England for his country. In his words, the rhetorical skill of Miranda spoke not just to his young disciple, but to the prosperity as well. As the self-appointed persecutor of Spanish American emancipation movement, he simply passed the torch onto a generation not yet born when he took himself into exile to fight for their precious liberty. The advice opened with praise of the young Chilean's honored discretion and solemnly warned him of the dangerous mission ahead. Miranda rightly feared Spanish reprisal, telling O'Higgins, as you leave England, do not forget a single minute that there are in all world but no one other nation which you may speak of policy openly, and this nation is the United States. Furthermore, Miranda warned him to be careful and prudent when talking about others into his confidence. O'Higgins should distrust all men over 40 years of age, he said, because youth is the most natural constituent for revolution. Yet Miranda had learned that it is a mistake to think that all men, simply because they have a crown on their head or sit on an easy chair of the churchmen, are entirely fanatics or enemies of the rights of man. I know from experience that his class contains some of the most enlightened and liberal men in South America. Miranda must have been thinking of the patriot exile Jesuits such as Viscardo and the important nation-building intellectual work they have undertaken thousands of miles from home. Extended residence in foreign environment had heightened the Jesuit sense of American identity, just as he had done to Miranda and then to O'Higgins. The Venezuelans remind his student of the overwhelming power of patriotism. I have always tried to impute you with these principles of our conversation. It is one of the objects that I want you to remember, not just all of the days, but in each one of yours hours. Love your country, embrace this sentiment constantly, fulfilling it by all possible means, because only through his longevity and energy you will be able to prevail. Miranda always remembered comfortably to the company of a military inclined young man who he come to serve both teacher and father figure. More than once he fondly remembered O'Higgins as my son. Years later, a soldier in Miranda ill-fated excursion on the Venezuela coast recalled the general assumed the manner of a father and instructor of the young man. His story carried them to distant places like Troy, Babylon, Jerusalem, Rome, Athens, Syracuse, Africa, Peninsula, and France. Miranda and O'Higgins were fascinated with the idea of the fight. After all, theirs was the age of the Atlantic Revolution, a generation suckling into trees of freedom and liberty. Great nations struggled into being a great leader who personified them. Military men like Washington and Napoleon. Commanders respect both sides of the ocean. Simon Bolivar, Bernal O'Higgins, Jose de San Martin, and the three prominent figures of South American independence. All lived in Europe at various times during Napoleonic Wars and read variously in Miranda's vast library of books in tactics and military history. Despite its great distance from continental Spain. Everyone understood the Spanish-American emancipation would imply military action. In 1801, nobody was thinking much detail about setting up a government structure. For Miranda and his generation, it was as though independence from Spain and local government would solve all their problems. In large measure, they were right. Their ability to control one's own commercial policy, collect taxes, utilize them for local improvement, administer justice quickly based on local norms. These were the reasonable, clear goals of the emancipation movement. It was logical that their attention should turn first to the immediate task and within the continent of Spanish colonial territory. The rest could be sorted out later. Old Higgins returned to Chile, infected with revolutionary fever. For lack of anything else, Miranda dusted off his 1790 plan for the Incan Republic of South America and resubmitted to Pitt. His third go-around with British sponsorship was more concerned, no longer confined to lobbying the Prime Minister office alone. When he learned that humility petitioned the government would not be enough, he had appealed to several constituents by willing to offer them something concrete in return for their support. He had known how to dance the quadrille and make witty small talks among other potential supporters. Socializing, therefore, became Miranda's patriotic duty. Este, by 1903, he was no longer a lone voice. British military leader and entrepreneurs urged the British government to take action. Significant elements of the aristocracy, learned general public, were not far behind. Miranda had influential friends like him personally and found his place to be worthy cause for heroic and free British nation. If emancipation made them some money along the way, so much that the better. Since August 1796, Pitt, Nicolas Van Sittard, and the Secretary of War Harry Dundas had agreed on the general outlines of the plan to topple the Spanish Empire from staging around and recently captured island of Trinidad. Miranda started meeting regularly with Francisca Pil, Mavili, and Sir Ivanev to formulate actual expedition plans. It was only a matter of time before thorny question of leadership arose. Miranda quite naturally viewed himself as the obvious candidate, but the politicians were less eager to put British troops under foreign command. Thomas Picton of Trinidad was accepted as a commander, although he was in the view uttered as a rough, foul-mouthed devil as ever lived. Picton has extensive experience in the Caribbean military affairs. He led the British captured Trinidad from Spain in 1797 and was consistently valuable friends on Miranda's causes. The first revolution happened in 1806 in Venezuela, and we see the first Colombian flag. It was a disaster because the Spaniards already knew in advance of the attempted rebellion, so they were basically caught before they could do anything significant. But when they tried again in August 3, 1806, he raised the flag. On the soils of La Vela de Coro, he and his ragged, scared troops marched inland for 12 silent minutes until they reached the town of Coro itself, which they found abandoned but for a few women and old men. Catholic priests apparently had told the frightened citizens to flee before lawless heretics arrived to rob and kill them. They did not have worry of that score. Miranda had issued strict order that all personal property must be respected. At one lone point, Miranda's men, undesirably jittery and confused the municipality of language spoken among them, accidentally fired at each another from the opposite end of the town, causing several casualties from friendly fire. The general distributed various signs and handshakes decorate the portraits of Pompon. General Perez Ford, George Washington, Miranda himself surrounded by the promise, the day of day in South America. Others contain the phrase, not commerce but union. Let art, industry, and commerce flourish, and even religion and its holy minister be protected. Some flags had imagery of Christopher Columbus placed in the center with the British colors providing the background. England was depicted as a maritime goddess with the Spanish lion lying prostrate at her feet. These carefully constructed imagery give clear visual insight to the sort of patriotic civic culture Miranda intended to create in Venezuela. His attempt to harness their future both politically and economically to Britain. Although James Biggs believed the opposite Spanish forces never came within 3 or 4 miles of Coro, Miranda decided they were surrounded and had to abandon the town after just a few days. The general was not prepared to let himself fall into Spanish hands. Beating and harshly retreating from Coro to the coast, able-bodied men carried their injured compatriots on litters. Their exertion obviously meant that they had to stop frequently in order to relieve each other. One eyewitness claimed Miranda flew into a violent rage, pretending that it was an unnecessary delay, and they said if he wouldn't slow down the march, they should be left behind on the side of the road. If everyone wanted to complain, Miranda was prepared to shoot them there on the spot. On August 13, just after 11 days in Venezuela, Miranda gave orders for the Launder to sail away to Aruba. leaving behind the pile of well-worded proclamations, some tattered uniform, and a lot of questions. While his disillusioned men recovered from their injuries and from yellow fever, Miranda never once visited them in the hospital, but rather sat in his comfortable quarters, picking his teeth in silence, saving the best rations for himself, his friend, and his dog. When he left Ecuador, it had been a disaster in all imaginable ways. Thanks to the extensive spy web operating at free comments, Spanish colonial authorities were informed about Miranda's activity. They had ample warning that he was calmly and simply waiting for the expedition to land. Furthermore, after 30 years absent, very few people remember him or respond to his call. Most important, however, he had been Miranda's own conflicted leadership. Although he had been preparing for his triumphal return for most of his adult life, once the fateful day arrived, his heart simply was not in it. He had always enjoyed the sociability of preparation, meeting with governors, contractors, and investors, signing up bright-eyed recruits anxious to serve under his command. But when it came down to the actual fight, Miranda had passed his prime. He was an old man, and liberation was a game for the young. Furthermore, Miranda had a lot to live for, and all it was back in England. His young wife and two beloved sons. An interesting and powerful group of friends access to publish in various public forums, a wonderful home, and established a reputation. If found there was his heart, there is no surprise that a 56-year-old Miranda wandered out of his creaky ship and back into the arms of his young family. Ironically, Miranda was actually homesick for England. This is because of the best evidence conflicting national identity. As an example, Miranda named his vessel after American personal place, with a typical reference to a classic hero or lofty concept. Better is Cheddar in the Lanterre, in English after his 3-year-old British son. A million details require his immediate attention, yet he still found time to write frequent and long letters to Vansittart, John Turnbull, and his wife Sarah. He struggled to go to his affairs back in home. Miranda especially told them about to baptize their children by the Catholic priest. And Miranda and his wife gave birth to their second son, Francisco Jr. And after all this time, this gave birth to the first revolution for the independent Latin America and the idea of a united Latin America.